Hey everyone, how's it going? Dr. Incompetent here, and let's read a book. I'd like to read The Heart of Clear Springs, Volume 1. Under the cascading moonlight, a tearful boy made his wish at the spring. A fairy from afar, who had taken up residence in the unoccupied spring, listened in silence to his wordless wish. Spring fairies know nothing of distant memories or deep dreams. They are born of water's essence, faceless descendants of the angels. Thus, when the curious fairy emerged from the water and heard the cry of that boy's heart, she became interested in this life, younger and more fragile than her own. The silent fairy reached out her formless fingers, cold as the midnight dew and soft as fortune foregone, and gently caressed the boy's forehead and cheeks. Startled by this stranger's touch, the boy lifted his head and met the fairy's gaze. "Can you make my wish come true?" the boy asked. The fairy of the spring was surprised and confused by this presumptuous question, but she could not speak, so she simply nodded her head. Satisfied, the boy left. He did not know that the spring fairy was alone, without friends or family, and that she had lost a great deal of her wisdom. Only when the spring flower flowed from the cracks in the stone into her pool, and when she gazed upon the fractured image of the moon in the rippling water, did she slowly regain the ability to think and to mimic fragments of speech. Like a curious child, the fairy observed the world around her in innocence, wonder, and love. She rejoiced with the fox and the squirrel who stole berries, and grieved at the dark clouds that covered the horizon. And for that young boy, a feeling complex yet immature welled forth from within her heart. All alone in this world, she had neither the power nor wisdom from which to grant his wish, but she could share it, and she drew life from sharing his burdens. Interesting. So Volume 1 tells us of a fairy in the spring, and, normally, traditionally, when we think of this, we think about, I guess, a game like Zelda, or traditional Japanese games where the spring fairy is a powerful force that can grant wishes, or even the sword from the Lady in the Lake in Arthurian legend. But here we see that that's not the case, that this fairy has no power, but her power perhaps is in simply sharing his burdens, listening, and through listening and empathy, she grants the boy's wish in some small way. Maybe. We'll see. Volume 2. As he gazed at the fractured image of the moon carried by the water's ripples, the boy poured his heart out to the spring. From within his words she learned much of him, and from her silence he strengthened his belief in himself. Dimly, the spring fairy understood that there was good in the world beyond moonlight and fruits, and more to darkness than mere clouds. The boy spoke to her of forests and trees, cities and walls, and shared with her his joys, his sorrow, and his fears. As she listened to him, she became enamored of this imperfect world into which she had been born. When the boy grew frustrated at his powerlessness, the spring fairy would gently and quietly wipe away his tears. From them, she grew to understand the world outside the spring a little more. Those tears flowed into the water, and the fairy purified them, turning them into a sweet nectar that brought him sweet dreams. The boy forgot the pain of his waking hours and met the silent fairy by her spring in his sleep. Every time that happened, the fairy too would smile, asleep in the pool drenched in moonlight. The fresh dew nourished the boy's dreams, and the boy's dreams rejuvenated the lonely fairy's soul. In those dreams, the spring fairy told the boy tales of the faraway realm of Hydro. She spoke of her sapphire blue homeland. She sang of the homesickness of exile, and she sighed for separation and belonging. In those dreams, the boy became the one who silently listened, who wept for her troubles, and who rejoiced in her happiness. Over time, the spring fairy gained the power of speech from the boy's memories and dreams. Over time, they became friends who shared all. Wow, so Volume 2, I have to say, it's starting to remind me a little bit of the Shel Silverstein book, The Giving Tree, and the way that the human is asking for wish fulfillment from nature, and how nature is forthcoming. But in this case, it's not necessarily that way. It's maybe more reciprocal. I mean, at the end of The Giving Tree, it becomes reciprocal, but here it's a mutual friendship, and they both benefit from sharing each other's wishes, desires, and dreams. I also like that we learn that the fairy is from the realm of Hydro, where the Hydro magic apparently, originates. And so I don't know if they mean the land realm of Hydro, which has, I don't believe, been unlocked in the game yet, or if they mean like some abstract, pure form realm of Hydro where the source power comes from. I don't know, but I think it's really interesting. Volume 3. When the wind ceased to blow, the moon's fractured reflection in the pool was made whole, and the boy heard the fairy's voice for the first time. Fairies are tender, sensitive beings beyond the ken of humans, and the boy was deeply taken by her gentle, elegiac voice. But fairies, being tender and sensitive beyond human ken, through his eyes she saw his naked yearning and the promise that was about to leave his lips, and suddenly the fairy was afraid. Mortal lives are strong but fleeting, and the boy must grow, and grow old. Once youth and innocence had faded, how would he treat his elemental descendants? In the twilight of his life, would he blame himself for throwing his life away for a childish promise? The spring fairy was pure and kind, but she did not understand human love. She had never seen the miracle of humanity and had merely sat idle through millennia of change. And so she greatly feared parting. What humans see as the miracle of devotion, elemental fairies can only perceive as fleeting pleasure, and even the power of fairies cannot reverse the aging of a loved one. The tender fairy could not bear to see that unavoidable day come, and with a kiss she stopped the boy from uttering the words, but the boy, in his innocence, mistook her rejection as her approval of his promise. From that moment, the fairy vowed that she would some day bear to leave him, and the boy vowed that he would remain by her spring forever. Well, it's kind of now becoming like the boy who became enamored with his own reflection and was turned to stone, looking into the water. We will have to see what happens with the reunion of these two over time, how the dimension of time affects their relationship. But unfortunately, I don't have Volume 4 yet, and so I'm going to have to find it. It hints that Volume 4 recounts a bitter ending finally faced by a boy who was no longer young and a spring fairy who had not grown old. So it's kind of like the Highlander or something, the immortal meeting the mortal, and the relationship as those relationships go, given that one dies and the other does not. I can't wait to see the conclusion, and I will check you guys in the next story. Thank you for listening. Take care.